Hello everyone. In this lecture, I will be talking about the loops that we have in Python. So let's have an introduction of one of the loops, which is the for loop. Generally, we are going to discuss them. All right. So we all know that we have, if we talk about loops, there are two types. One is um, the counting control loop, and one type is basically the conditional. In counting control loop, we only have the for loop, which is going to be the point of discussion in this video. And in conditional, we have further two types. One is the pre-condition, and one is the post-condition. Now, this applies to your pseudocodes, not in Python. Precondition is where the condition is basically checked first, and then the instructions or the actions are basically run. In post conditions, the actions or the instructions are basically run at least one time and then they are checked. So for loop is basically the counting loop, and the precondition loop is basically when we have the condition first, we need to check, which is while loop. And the post condition is that we have the repeat until loop. In this video, we're just going to talk about the for loop, and there are some specifics related to it. Now, as the name suggests, the loops are basically repetitions. So we can say the loops are repetitions. Now, when we say we want to find a solution to a problem, there are multiple ways of doing so. But there are some which are efficient, and loops come into play when we want efficient solution to a problem, especially when a certain aspect or a certain action has to be done for a certain number of times. Now, the basic syntax for loop is that you start off with for I in range, and in the brackets you're going to put in your boundaries. So the boundaries are, let's say, 1 till 11, and then you're going to put a colon. Once you press enter, you will fall in the loop, and then you will have to type in your instructions for the for loop, which is going to be right over here. Now let's talk about this in detail, the syntax. For is basically to identify which loop you're going for. I is basically the incremental value, you would say, or the index, you would say, in range 1 till 11. Now this is very important to understand, because this is what is the lower boundary is, and this is the upper boundary. Now one thing needs to be kept in mind, that the lower boundary is basically inclusive in the number of times. However, in the upper boundary, the number that you specify is not included. So if I write for I in range 1, 11, that means that this loop is going to run for 10 times, right? Why? Because this is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4 up until 10. This can also be written as if the requirement is still to run the loop for 10 times, this can also be written as 0 till 10. Again, it means the same thing, but in this case, the I is going to start from 0 and it is going to go up until 9. So even in that case, it is going to run 10 times. So you need to specify the lower boundary and the upper boundary, and obviously it will be depending on the scenario and how many times you need to run this for loop. Another thing that needs to be kept in mind is basically the indentation. So for example, if this is your loop, your instructions are going to go in here. So whatever the number of instructions are, they are going to run 10 times. And once you are going to finish the loop, there are not going to be no footer statements. There are no footer statements in the for loop. That means you're not going to write next, or you're going to write end for nothing of that sort. Why? Because it follows the loops follows indentation. So if you are to end the loop, you will simply come out of the loop and you start typing under this indentation. Again, you need to be careful that what you want to run in the loop and what you do not want to run in the loop. So that needs to be identified and that needs to be written accordingly. If you're going to be within the loop and you write a statement, it is going to run that many times. And if you want to run that statement just once, but you need to exit the loop, so you need to come out of the loop so that you can write your end statement, or let's say what the result is. So let me show you a few examples using PyCharm. Now, I'm going to write a very simple line of code so that we can understand the indentation and how the loop works, the counting control loop works. So first of all, I would say that I'm going to write in for I in range. Let's say the range is from 1 to 11, right? And then you have to put in colon. Once you press enter, the IDE will automatically detect that you're writing the for loop. So it will put you under the indentation for the for loop. And then let's say I'm going to write, take a print of the I. I is basically the incremental value which is going from 1 till 10. So the instruction first says that for I in the range from 1 to 11, which is actually 10, print I. So that means I should be getting the outcome as the value of I, which is starting from 1 going up to 10. So as the increment is going to go on, I is going to have an updated value. So first of all, in the first run cycle, the I will be assigned as 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, up until 10. Now if I press Shift F10, you can see that the instruction was being run 10 times. The what instruction? The print instruction. However, the first instruction in which I initiated the loop, it only specified that the loop has to run 10 times. And the first instruction in that loop was print the value of I. So the first time it ran, the value of I was 1. Then second time it's 2, then 3, then 4 up until 10. So similarly, I told you that you can also write in 0, comma 10. That also means that you need to get 10 values of I. So pressing Shift F10, you have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are 10 values. You can also customize the printing, right? So printing, let's say I'll just type in hello along with the value of I. So that can be done as well. You can have a custom string of characters which are combined with the value of I. So now if I press Shift F10, I get the same result, and the number of times it's basically going to print. Now, let's say I'm not going to print within the loop. I am going to come down, get out of my loop, and then I'll just print the value of I. Now this time, the instruction is basically not inside my loop, it is outside my loop. So Shift F10 gets me the error of printing. That says that there's an error of the value of I. So you cannot have the I printed as the value. However, what needs to be kept in mind is that the number of times it's going to run, it's going to assign the updated value to I. Now, for example, if I just delete this, now the scenario is that I want to find out a very common procedure that we do with in order to understand the counting loop or the for loop is that we want to have the multiplication table, right? So I will add write down a multiplication table of 5, let's say, up till 10. So in this scenario, what we're going to do is we're going to take in our number of the table, right? So I'm going to have a table of 5, and I want to print the multiplication table of 5, which is going to go up until 10. So for this, I will write in for I in range. Now the range is up until 10 values, right? So I will put in 1, comma 11, and then a colon. And then I need to, type in the answer. Now the answer is basically the number which I'm going to multiply my I with. Remember the incremental value, the number of times it's going to run, it's going to increment the I value. So I need to have a number with which I am going to multiply the I with. I, regardless of anything, is going to go from 1 till 10. So first loop, first time cycle, 1, then 2, then 3, so on up until 10. So for that, I need the number myself. So for that, if I have to calculate the multiplication table of 5, 5 is basically the number that I'm going to input. So I would assign this as number equals to, let's say it's going to be an integer. I will take the input, or I can just define it as 5. Let's take the input from the user that please input your number. Now when we do this, it is going to take the input from the user and it will put this or assign this value to my variable, which is num, and it is of the integer data type. Now I'll type in, let's say I want to have the multiples, right, displayed all together. I would say print num, which is actually multiplying the value of I. So the first time when it runs, I is basically 1. The number is basically my input, which is going to be 5. So the first time it's going to run, it's going to multiply 1 with 5. The second time it's going to run, it's going to be 5 times 2. Number remains static. However, the loop is basically going to run 10 times. So if I take the Shift F10 to run this, so it says, please input your number. So I will put in 5 and then the loop starts. So for I in range 1 till 11, it is going to multiply the I value with the number that I have input. So similarly, I can take out the table of, let's say, 11, and it will display me the multiplication table of 11, keeping in mind that I am utilizing the value of I with the input number. This can also be customized. Like I said, with the string value, we can also customize this by a message, or let's say how we write this. Usually when we're writing multiplication tables, I would say that, okay, I'm going to find out the number table of, or the multiplication table of 5. So that is basically my number. Then I'm going to concatenate it by putting in a comma, speech marks, space, let's say X, to represent the multiplication sign. Then I want the I value to be presented. I value is going to be from 1 till 10. And then it's going to be concatenated with equals to sign, further concatenated with the operation, which is actually the number into I. And we close the bracket. Now, if I press Shift F10, I will put in the number, let's say 5. I press enter, you get the table displayed the way we write it. You can also change the order if you want. You can have the I appearing first and the number appearing second. All I need to do is just remove this num. Instead of num, I'm going to write I, and over here I'm going to type in num. So Shift F10, I'll press and type in 5, and this is how you get the table, the multiplication table, using the count controlled loop, which is for loop. So that's the main crux of having or making use of the for loop. Now, and there's also a concept in which the for loop can be utilized as basically about totaling up, or let's say finding out an average, taking multiple numbers and getting a sum of it. So that can be also done using the for loop. So let's say I'll just come out. Let's say find the total of 5 numbers. Find the total of 5 numbers, right? So you can take 5 inputs. Now, previously what we used to do was I could assign number 1 equals to int input. Let's say the message is input your first number, right? Then I'm going to have number 2. Let's just copy paste this. Copy it. 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let's change the name of the variables. So this is going to be 2. this is going to be 3, this is going to be 4, this is going to be 5. And then I would say that, okay, the total is equals to num1 plus num2 plus num3 plus num4 plus num5. And then I'll take the output of my total variable. So shift F10 to run this. This is basically the first instruction set, which is actually trying to find the multiplication table. So let's say it's 5. We got the multiplication out of the way. Now we onto this code block, right? Over here, we're going to input our first number, which is 2. Then the second number, which is 3. I should have changed the text as well. Let's do that. So second, third, fourth, fifth. So shift F10, first number is, let's say 10, second number 20, 30, 40, 50. So the total should be 90, 120, 140, and 150. So as you can see, I got the total to be 150. However, you can get the total, but like I said, this can be used in order to find out the efficient way of doing so. So we are to take the input. Now you need to identify what is being repeated in this particular code block, the inputs, right? The input was taken 5 times and it was getting assigned to a variable, which was num1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What we can do is we can find, or we can take the input just the instruction can be written just once, and we can put this instruction in the for loop so that we don't have to type multiple times that we have to take the input and assign it to a variable. What we can do is we can just take the input, put it under a loop so that the number is basically taken with a certain number of times, and then the addition is done. So how to do it the efficient way using the for loop? So find the total or totaling total using for loop. Okay, so first of all, I need to assign my total to be 0, because this is going to be adding up, or this is going to be assigned to my total variable. Now, beginning my for loop, which is for I in range. Now let's say I'm going to take 5 numbers. So 5 numbers is going to be starting with 1 but ending at 6. Again, the upper boundary is not going to be inclusive. You put down a colon and you are inside the loop. Now inside the loop, I am going to take my second variable, which is basically the number, which is going to be the input, or let's say I'm going to have it as integer input, and please input your number, right? I just have to write this once because, again, since this statement is inside the loop, so it's going to run 5 times. And when it does, I can't simply take the print out or take the output within the loop. What I need to do is what value I give as my I, or let's say the first time I'm going to put in, let's say 10, needs to be added up to my total. However, the total is previously what? 0. So let's say the loop runs, the first value I put in is 10. Now that 10 needs to be assigned to my total. So technically it's going to be 0 plus 10. And the new value of total is going to be 10. And the second time the loop runs, it would automatically take in another number. That number again will get assigned to the previous value of total, which is 10. So let's say the second number I'm going to put in is 20. So 20 is going to be added to it, added to the previous value of total. How do you do it? You simply write total plus total plus equals to num. So this is a technique in which you can assign the updated value to your previous value of the variable. But in this method, what needs to be kept in mind? Total was initiated with a 0. Now, after that, I am going to take the print out. Now, the print or the output cannot be in the loop. It needs to be outside my loop so that I get the final answer. If I put this inside my loop, that will also be printing out or outputting the result that many times the loop is going to run. So I will put in get out of my loop and I will print the total. Right? Now if I press Shift F10, the first is for the multiplication. So let's say 5, that's the table. Now this code block is going to run, right? However, I've used the same variable name, but that doesn't matter because later in my instruction, the value is again set to 0. So let's see, 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So the total comes out to be 150. Now, at this point, the total was being set to 150, but on line 24, it is again set to 0. Now I'm inside my for loop, which is going to run 5 times. So let's say I'm going to input 20, 10, or let's change it. Let's have 5, 10, that's 15, that's 30, that's 50, and then again 50. So the answer should come out to be 100. See, so this does the same exact thing and this does the same exact thing, just that this code is more efficient because it used or consumed lesser number of lines in order to find the total. Keep this technique in mind that you can use this plus equals to. This is similar to the counting that we do in pseudocode, in which we are to, let's say, we can write sum equals to sum plus number, right? Or the thing that we use for count equals to count plus 1 for increment. So we can write these statements in Python like this: sum plus equals to num. This means exactly the same. And if we are to increment the value, so it can be written count plus equals to 1. So it means the same. I hope you were able to follow the for loop, and in the next video I will be explaining the while loop. Why? Because that we do not have the repeat until in Python. So you only have to worry about two kinds of loops. One is the for loop, which is going to be the count controlled. So you set the number of times you are to run a particular instruction. And then we have the conditional loop, which is only while. I hope you were able to follow this tutorial related to the for loop. If you have any questions, do post them or do let me know. I can explain it further with more examples. Thank you. That's it for now. This was the for loop.